History is written by the victors, but in the underworld, survival is dictated by the translators. One wrong verb, one missed inflection, and a business deal turns into a bloodbath. Cain Valenti was the king of New York, a man who feared nothing but the silence of a room he couldn't control. He was minutes away from walking into a trap set by the Russian Bratva, blinded by a translator who was too scared to speak the truth. He needed a miracle. He didn't expect to find it in a waitress wearing a stained apron, pouring cheap whiskey, who understood exactly why the man across the table was smiling. This is the story of how a spilled drink and 5 languages saved a Mafia empire. The neon sign above the rusty nail flickered with a dying buzz, casting an intermittent red glow over the wet pavement of Hell's Kitchen. Inside, the air smelled of stale beer, lemon polish, and the distinct metallic tang of desperation. Hunter Bennett adjusted her apron, the strings digging into her waist. She was 26, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone who had lived 3 lifetimes. To the regulars, dock workers, petty thieves, and exhausted beat cops, she was just Hunter, the quiet girl who never messed up an order, never smiled too much, and never asked questions. That was the point. Invisibility was a shield. Table 4 needs a wipe down, Bennett, the manager, a greasy man named Rick, barked from behind the bar. And look alive, we got high rollers coming in. Private booking in the back booth. Hunter nodded, keeping her head down. High rollers, at the Rusty Nail, usually meant drug dealers who had made an extra $1,000 that week and wanted to flash it. But tonight felt different. The air in the dive bar shifted. The usual hum of conversation died instantly as the front door swung open. 4 men walked in. They didn't move like the local dealers. They moved like predators entering a pen of sheep. They wore suits that cost more than the building. Italian wool, bespoke cuts that hid shoulder holsters perfectly. In the center was Cain Valenti. Hunter froze near the jukebox. Everyone knew the face. It had been plastered across the New York Post 6 months ago during the racketeering trials, usually accompanied by headlines like "The Untouchable Don." He was taller in real life, his presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. He had dark hair swept back, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and eyes that scanned the room with terrifying precision. "Back booth," Cain said. His voice was low, a rumble of gravel. "And clear the room. Everyone out." His guards didn't have to ask twice. They moved through the bar, flashing guns tucked into waistbands. Patrons scrambled, leaving half-finished beers and change on the tables. "You too, sweetheart." One of the guards, a stocky man with a broken nose, grunted at Hunter. "Leave her," Cain said, sliding into the red leather booth in the back corner. He didn't look at Hunter. He looked at his watch. "Someone needs to bring the drinks. Just keep her out of earshot until we need refills." Hunter felt a cold shiver trace her spine. She should have run. She should have walked out the back door and never come back. But the rent on her studio apartment in Queens was 2 weeks late, and Rick would fire her without hesitation. She retreated to the far end of the bar, pretending to clean glasses. 10 minutes later, the second group arrived. They were different. Lighter hair, harsher faces, smelling of expensive cologne and cold tobacco. Russians, the Bratva. Leading them was Nikolai Volkov, a man known for feeding his rivals to pigs in the marshes of Jersey. The atmosphere in the bar became brittle. One wrong move, and the glass windows would be painted red. Cain sat opposite Nikolai. Between them sat a nervous, sweating man in a cheap grey suit, Cain's translator. "Whiskey," Cain called out, signaling Hunter. "Bottle? 4 glasses." Hunter grabbed a bottle of Macallan, the only good stuff they kept in the safe, and 4 tumblers. She walked towards the booth, her heart hammering against her ribs. She kept her eyes on the tray. As she approached, the conversation stopped. She set the glasses down. Her hands didn't shake. She had been trained better than that. "Tell him," Cain said to his translator, leaning back, "that I am willing to open the Newark ports for his shipping containers. But the tax is 20%. The translator, a man Hunter heard them call Benny, swallowed hard. He looked at Nikolai and spoke in Russian. "He says you can use the ports. He asks for 20%. Nikolai laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. He turned to his own lieutenant and spoke rapidly in Russian, his voice too fast for Benny to catch the nuance. "Tell the American dog he is dreaming. We will take the ports, and once he signs the access papers tonight, we will slit his throat in the parking lot." Hunter's hand froze on the bottle of Macallan. Nikolai turned back to Kane, smiling a wide, shark-like grin. He spoke in Russian again, slower this time, for Benny. "Tell him we accept his terms. We are happy to do business." Benny, the sweat now dripping down his temple, turned to Kane. "Boss, Nikolai says he is honored. He accepts the 20%. He says you are a generous man." Kane nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold fountain pen and a folded document. "Good," Kane said. "Let's sign." He uncapped the pen. The tip hovered over the paper. Hunter looked at the Russian. He was gripping a steak knife under the table, his knuckles white. If Kane signed, he died. If he died, the witnesses died. That meant Hunter died. The training she had buried for 5 years, the lessons from her father, the diplomat, before he was assassinated in Belgrade, kicked in. Hunter slammed the whiskey bottle down on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Don't sign it," she said. The silence that followed was absolute. Kane slowly turned his head to look at her. For the first time, he actually saw her. Not as a waitress, but as an obstacle. His eyes were the color of ice. "Excuse me?" Kane asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Get the girl out of here," the guard with the broken nose snarled, stepping forward. "He's lying to you," Hunter said, her voice steady, though her knees were trembling. She switched her gaze to Benny, the translator. "And he is incompetent." Benny turned red. "You shut your mouth, bitch. I speak fluent." Hunter ignored him. She looked directly at Kane. "The Russian didn't say he honored your terms. He said, 'Tell the American dog he is dreaming.'" He told his lieutenant that once you sign the access papers, they are going to cut your throat in the parking lot. Kane didn't move. He didn't look at the Russians. He just stared at Hunter. "You speak Russian?" "I speak 5 languages," Hunter said, "and I know that honored and dog don't sound anything alike." Nikolai, realizing the tone had shifted, barked something in Russian. "What is the whore saying?" Without hesitation, Hunter replied in flawless, crisp Russian. Her accent wasn't the rough street slang of Moscow. It was the refined high-society dialect of St. Petersburg. "I am telling him that you lack the honor to do business like a man, Nikolai Volkov. So you resort to knives under the table." Nikolai's face went purple. He stood up, knocking the table. "Who are you?" Kane raised his hand. The motion was small, but it commanded the room. His guards raised their weapons instantly, aiming them at the Russians. The Russians drew theirs. The bar became a standoff. Kane looked at Benny. "Is she telling the truth?" Benny was hyperventilating. "Boss, They speak so fast. Dialect is heavy. I thought." "Get out," Kane said. "Boss, run, before I change my mind." Benny scrambled out of the booth and bolted for the door. Kane turned his gaze back to Hunter. He looked at her cheap uniform, her messy bun, the stain on her apron. Then he looked at the calmness in her eyes. "Sit down," Kane commanded. "I have tables to clean," Hunter said. Kane pulled a gun, a matte black Glock, and set it on the table. "I said, sit down. You are my translator now." Hunter hesitated, then slid into the booth where Benny had been. She was sitting next to the most dangerous man in New York, across from the most dangerous man in Moscow. "Ask him," Kane said, his eyes never leaving Nikolai, "if he wants to renegotiate, or if he wants to die in a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen." Hunter turned to Nikolai. She channeled her father's voice. The diplomatic coldness that could freeze a room. "Mr. Valenti wishes to know if you would prefer a new arrangement, or if you wish for this to be your final meal. Personally, I wouldn't recommend the fish." A flicker of amusement crossed Nikolai's face. He respected strength. He respected audacity. And he was clearly confused by the waitress who spoke like a czarina. Nikolai sat back down slowly. He released the knife he was holding under the table. "Tell him," Nikolai grunted, 30% tax, and I want access to the Queen's warehouse. Hunter turned to Kane. "He counters with 30% and wants the Queen's warehouse." Kane tapped his finger on the gun. "Tell him 25%. And the Queen's warehouse is full of my mother's furniture. He can have the Bronx depot." The negotiation lasted an hour. Hunter translated back and forth, filtering out the insults, smoothing over the jagged edges, and ensuring clarity. She was brilliant. She was precise. Finally, hands were shaken. No papers were signed. The trust was gone. But an accord was reached. Nikolai stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked at Hunter with a strange expression. "You are wasted pouring drinks, girl." He left with his entourage. The door swung shut. The silence returned. Kane Valenti didn't move. He poured himself a glass of Macallan and drank it in one shot. Then he turned to Hunter. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just a waitress," Hunter said, standing up. "I need to get back to work." "No," Kane said. He stood up, towering over her. "You just saved my life, and you heard the details of a multi-million-dollar criminal conspiracy." "I have a bad memory," Hunter said quickly. "I've already forgotten it." Kane signaled his guards. "Grab her coat." "Excuse me?" Hunter stepped back. "You aren't safe here," Kane said, his voice flat. "Volkov knows your face. He knows you embarrassed him. If I leave you here, you'll be dead by morning." "That's my problem," Hunter snapped. Kane stepped closer. He smelled of gunpowder and expensive sandalwood soap. He reached out and touched her chin, tilting her face up. "It's my problem now," he said. "You're coming with me." Hunter sat in the back of an armored SUV, sandwiched between Kane and the window. The city lights blurred past, streaks of gold and white against the darkness. She clutched her worn canvas backpack to her chest. It contained her entire life, a change of clothes, a passport under the name Emily Vance, and a locket with a picture of her parents. "Where are we going?" she asked, breaking the silence. Kane didn't look up from his phone. He was typing furiously. "A safe house, until I figure out what to do with you." "I can't go to a safe house. I have a cat," Hunter lied. Kane glanced at her. "We'll buy you a new cat. You can't just buy a—" Hunter stopped. Arguing with a Mafia don was a futile exercise. They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind for the winding roads of Long Island. They pulled up to a massive estate, gated and guarded. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. The car stopped. A guard opened the door. "Welcome to Purgatory," Kane muttered. He led her into a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment building. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums. It was cold, sterile, and imposing. "Marco," Kane called out. A tall, thin man in a pristine butler's uniform appeared. "Yes, sir?" "Set up the blue room for Miss—" Kane paused, looking at Hunter. "I don't even know your name." "Hunter," she said. "Hunter Bennett. Miss Bennett," Kane finished. "Get her some clothes. Burn what she's wearing. She smells like stale beer." Hunter bristled. "This apron costs $15. "I'll reimburse you," Kane said dryly. "Marco, make sure she eats. I have business to attend to." He started to walk away toward a set of double oak doors. "Wait," Hunter called out. Kane stopped and turned. "Why?" she asked. "Why didn't you just kill me? It would have been easier." Kane looked at her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "Volkov was right," he said. "You were wasted pouring drinks. I need a translator, Hunter. My last one resigned tonight. You have the job." "I didn't apply." "In my world," Kane said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, "you don't apply. You're chosen." He disappeared into his office. Hunter was led upstairs to a room that looked like a suite at the Ritz. She showered, scrubbing the scent of the rusty nail off her skin. She put on the silk robe Marco had left for her. She walked to the window. Below, guards patrolled the perimeter with Rottweilers. She was trapped. But as she looked at her reflection in the glass, Hunter knew the truth. She wasn't just trapped because of Kane Valenti. She was trapped because she had exposed herself. She had spoken Russian. Perfect, diplomatic Russian. If word got out, if the wrong people in Europe heard about a waitress in New York who spoke like the late Ambassador Arthur Bennett, the Mafia would be the least of her worries. The people who killed her father were still out there. And she had just lit a flare in the dark. She needed to leave, tonight. She went to the door and tried the handle, locked from the outside. Panic rose in her throat. She moved to the window. It was a 20-foot drop. Suddenly the lock clicked. The door opened. It wasn't Kane. It was a woman. She was stunning, tall, blonde, wearing a dress that looked like it was painted on. She held a suppressed pistol at her side. "So," the woman hissed, "you're the new flavor of the month." Hunter backed up. "I'm just the translator." The woman stepped into the room and closed the door. She raised the gun. "Dom doesn't bring translators home to the estate. He brings mistresses. And I don't like sharing." Hunter's eyes widened. She realized two things instantly. First, this woman was Kane's jealous ex or current lover. Second, she was high. Her pupils were pinpoint small. "You have the wrong idea," Hunter said, raising her hands. "I work at a dive bar. I smell like fries." "You're pretty," the woman spat, in a mousy, tragic way. "Dom loves tragic cases." She raised the gun higher, aiming at Hunter's chest. "Say goodbye, mouse." Hunter stared down the barrel of the suppressed pistol. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her breathing remained controlled. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. It was the tactical breathing her father had taught her when she was 12, the same year he started checking under his car for explosives. The woman, whom Hunter would later learn was named Bianca, was vibrating with a cocktail of narcotics and rage. Her finger twitched on the trigger. "He doesn't need you," Bianca slurred, her eyes wild. "I was with him when he was nobody. I know where the bodies are buried." "If you shoot me," Hunter said, her voice dropping an octave, calm and authoritative, "the noise will alert the guards in the hall. Even suppressed, the slide action is loud. Kane will be here in 10 seconds. And if he finds you standing over a corpse in his house, what do you think he will do to you?" Bianca hesitated. The logic pierced through her high. I'll say you attacked me." "I'm wearing a bathrobe," Hunter pointed out. "You have a gun. The physics don't work, Bianca." Bianca's eyes narrowed. "Shut up." She stepped forward, closing the distance, extending the gun to press it against Hunter's forehead. That was the mistake. You never close the distance if you have a projectile weapon. It negates the advantage. As the cold metal touched Hunter's skin, instinct took over. It wasn't a choice. It was muscle memory burned into her by private security contractors in Brussels and self-defense instructors in Vienna. Hunter's left hand snapped up, batting the barrel of the gun outward, away from her face. Simultaneously, her right hand clamped onto Bianca's wrist, twisting it violently downward while she stepped into the woman's personal space. There was a sickening snap of cartilage. Bianca screamed, dropping the gun. Hunter didn't stop. She swept Bianca's legs out from under her, driving the woman into the plush carpet. In a heartbeat, Hunter was on top of her, pinning Bianca's good arm with her knee and pressing her forearm against Bianca's windpipe. Not enough to kill, but enough to terrify. The door flew open. Kane stood there, his tie undone, his gun drawn. Behind him, Marco the butler held a shotgun. Kane took in the scene. His ex-girlfriend, a known volatile element, pinned to the floor by the mousy waitress he had picked up an hour ago. Hunter looked up, her hair falling over her face, her eyes fierce. "She has a gun," Hunter said, breathless. "It's under the bed." Kane lowered his weapon slowly. He looked at Bianca, who was sobbing, and then at Hunter. He gestured to Marco. "Get Bianca out of here," Kane said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Put her in a car. Drive her to the airport. If she ever steps foot in New York again, she disappears." "Dom, please," Bianca wailed as Marco hauled her up. "She attacked me. She's a witch." Marco dragged her out, closing the door. Kane holstered his gun. He didn't move toward Hunter. He stayed by the door, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. You disarmed her, Kane stated. Hunter stood up, tightening her robe. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking. I got lucky. She was high. Luck is winning a coin toss, Kane said, walking into the room. He bent down and retrieved the gun from under the bed. He ejected the magazine and cleared the chamber with a fluid motion, disarming an assailant, pinning them, and controlling the airway without killing them. That isn't luck. That's training. He tossed the empty gun onto the duvet. He stepped closer to Hunter, invading her space. The air between them crackled with electricity. Who are you? Hunter Bennett. I told you, she lied, backing up until her legs hit the edge of the bed. My father was strict. He put me in self-defense classes. Kane laughed, a short, dry bark. I have men on my payroll who served in the Green Berets who couldn't have taken Bianca down that clean. You move like a ghost. You speak Russian like a diplomat. You handle a gun like a soldier. He placed his hands on either side of her, trapping her against the bed frame. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I have enemies, Hunter. Real enemies. The Bratva, the Triads, the FBI. If you are a plant, if you are working for them, tell me now, and I will make your death quick. Hunter looked him in the eye. I'm not working for anyone. I'm running from everyone. Kane paused. He searched her face for a lie, but he found only a raw, painful truth. He pulled back, giving her space. Good, he said, because tomorrow we have work to do. I'm not your soldier, Kane. No, Kane said, walking to the door. You're my asset, and I protect my assets. He paused at the threshold. Sleep. Tomorrow we're going shopping. You can't meet the French delegation wearing a bathrobe. The dress was emerald green silk, backless, with a slit that ran up to the mid-thigh. It was elegant, dangerous, and cost more than Hunter had made in the last 3 years combined. Kane stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, adjusting his cufflinks. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like armor. When he heard Hunter's heels clicking on the marble, he looked up. For a moment, the King of New York looked struck dumb. Hunter descended slowly. Her hair was swept up in a complex chignon, revealing the long, elegant line of her neck. She wore diamond drop earrings that Marco had provided from the family vault. Don't stare, Hunter said as she reached the bottom step. It's unprofessional. Kane cleared his throat, regaining his composure. I'm checking for wires. Turn around. Hunter rolled her eyes but spun in a slow circle. Kane watched the silk ripple over her curves. Clean, he muttered. Let's go. The venue was Le Bernardin, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. Kane had rented out the entire private dining room. In the car, Kane briefed her. We are meeting Jean-Paul Gaultier, not the designer, the head of the Corsican Union. They control the heroin trade coming through Marseille. They want to move product through my concrete business. And you want to say yes? Hunter asked. I want to say maybe, Kane said. I need to gauge them. The Corsicans are notorious for smiling while they poison your wine. They speak a specific dialect, mixed with street slang. Can you handle it? I spent a summer in Corsica, Hunter said, looking out the window. I know the dialect. A summer in Corsica, Kane mused. Most waitresses spend their summers at Coney Island. They arrived. The restaurant was dimly lit, quiet and tense. 4 men sat at a round table. They were older, scarred, drinking red wine that cost $500 a bottle. Jean-Paul was a heavy-set man with a moustache and eyes like beads of oil. He stood up when Kane entered, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Monsieur Valenti, Jean-Paul said in heavy French, you bring a woman to a war council. Kane sat down, gesturing for Hunter to sit next to him. She is my voice. Treat her with the same respect you treat me. Hunter turned to Jean-Paul and spoke in flawless, rapid-fire French, lacing it with the rough, guttural slang of the Corsican docks. Monsieur Valenti wishes to express that while he respects the Union, he prefers his business meetings to be civilized, and in America, we do not dismiss women who are smarter than us. Jean-Paul raised an eyebrow. He laughed, delighted. She has fire. Good. Let us eat. The dinner proceeded. Courses came and went. Sea urchin, Truffle pasta, Wagyu beef. Hunter translated back and forth, navigating the complex negotiations. Kane was tough, demanding 40% of the distribution cut. Jean-Paul pushed for 25%. Under the table, Kane's hand rested on Hunter's knee. It was possessive, grounding. Every time she spoke, he watched her mouth, fascinated by the way she switched personalities when she switched languages. By the dessert course, the tension had eased. They were close to a deal at 32%. Then Hunter heard it. Jean-Paul turned to his lieutenant, a man named Luc, and murmured something while laughing. It was fast, quiet, and spoken in a very old, very specific local dialect from the mountains of Corsica, something almost no outsider would know. The poison should kick in within 10 minutes. Make sure the car is ready to dump the bodies. Hunter's blood ran cold. She looked at Kane. He was lifting his glass of wine, the toast to seal the deal. "Kane," she whispered in English, "don't drink." Kane froze. The glass hovered an inch from his lips. He didn't look at her, but his grip on the stem tightened. "Why?" he asked, smiling at Jean-Paul. "The wine," Hunter said, keeping a smile plastered on her face. "They poisoned the bottle. He just said it to his lieutenant." Kane set the glass down slowly. Jean-Paul frowned. "Is something wrong, Monsieur Valenti? You do not drink to our friendship?" Kane looked at Hunter. "Tell him," Kane said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "that I only drink to friendship when I know I'll wake up the next morning." Kane suddenly grabbed a steak knife from the table, and in one fluid motion, drove it through Jean-Paul's hand, pinning it to the mahogany table. Jean-Paul screamed. The room exploded into chaos. Kane's guards burst in from the kitchen, guns drawn. The Corsican bodyguards went for their weapons, but they were too slow. Within seconds, the Corsicans were on their knees, gun barrels pressed to the backs of their heads. Kane stood up, straightening his jacket. He picked up his wine glass. He walked over to Jean-Paul, who was whimpering, clutching his impaled hand. "You tried to kill me in my own city," Kane said. He handed the wine glass to Jean-Paul's lieutenant. "Drink it." The lieutenant shook his head, terrified. "No, please. Drink it," Kane roared. The lieutenant took the glass, his hands trembling, and downed it. He collapsed 30 seconds later, foaming at the mouth. Cyanide. Kane turned to Hunter. She was standing by the wall, pale but composed. "You saved me again," he said. He walked over to her, adrenaline making his pupils dilated. He didn't care about the bodies, the screaming Frenchman or the blood. He grabbed Hunter's face in his hands. "Who are you?" he demanded again, but this time it wasn't an interrogation. It was awe. "I told you," she whispered. "I'm the translator." Kane kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hard, desperate, and tasted of danger. Hunter hesitated for a split second, then kissed him back, her hands gripping the lapels of his tuxedo. For a moment, the violence of the room faded, leaving only the heat between them. Kane broke the kiss, breathing hard. He looked at Jean-Paul. "Get them out of here," Kane ordered his men. "Leave the boss alive. I want to have a conversation with him later about manners." He took Hunter's hand. "Come on, we're leaving." "Where?" Hunter asked. "Paris," Kane said. "This hit was ordered by someone higher up than the Corsicans. We need to find the source, and you're the only one who can speak the language." The private jet soared over the Atlantic at 40,000 feet. The cabin was silent, save for the hum of the engines. Hunter sat in a leather recliner, staring at the clouds. Kane was across from her, reviewing files on a tablet. He had been quiet since they left the restaurant. "You didn't just learn French in a summer," Kane said, not looking up. "You recognized a mountain dialect used by sheepherders in Corsica." Hunter sighed. She knew she couldn't keep lying. "Not completely. My father was Arthur Bennett," she said softly. Kane's head snapped up. He dropped the tablet. "Arthur Bennett, the U.S. ambassador to Serbia, the one who was assassinated in the Belgrade bombing 5 years ago?" "Yes," Hunter said. "I was in the car behind him. I saw it happen." Kane stared at her. The pieces were falling into place. "That's why you have the training. The diplomatic corps, the private security detail." "I was groomed to follow in his footsteps," Hunter said. 5 languages by the time I was 20. Tactical driving, negotiation. But after he died, I realized it wasn't a terrorist attack. It was a hit. Someone inside the State Department sold him out. And they know you saw it, Kane realized. I found his journals, Hunter said. He was investigating a money laundering ring that connected European politicians to the Mafia, a specific syndicate. Which one? Kane asked. Hunter looked at him. Yours, Kane, or at least a branch of it. Kane stood up. That's impossible. My father ran the family 5 years ago. He had a code. No politics, no terrorism. Maybe not your father, Hunter said, but someone close to him. The plane banked. The intercom beeped. Mr. Valenti, the pilot's voice crackled. We have a situation. Air traffic control in Paris just flagged our tail number. They have Interpol waiting on the tarmac. Kane swore. They found us. It's not Interpol, Hunter said, standing up. Real Interpol wouldn't flag the plane. They'd wait until we docked to arrest us quietly. If they are making a scene, it's a trap. They want to separate us. How do you know? Because that's how they got my father, Hunter said, her eyes cold. Kane grabbed a parachute bag from the emergency locker. Can you jump? Hunter looked at him like he was crazy. Skydiving? No, absolutely not. Well, learn fast, Kane said, strapping the rig onto her. Because we aren't landing in Paris. We're jumping over the French countryside. Kane, this is insanity! This is survival, Hunter. He pulled her close, buckling the straps. Trust me, I won't let you fall. He opened the rear hatch. The roar of the wind was deafening. The freezing air whipped into the cabin. Below them, the lights of rural France twinkled like distant stars. On 3, Kane yelled. I hate you, Hunter screamed. I know! Kane grabbed her, and they plunged into the black void together. The world was a screaming void of freezing wind and terrifying darkness. When the parachute finally flared, it jerked them upward with bone-jarring force. Kane groaned, his grip on Hunter tightening until it bordered on painful. There were 2 heartbeats suspended in the night sky over rural France, drifting down toward an abyss of black fields. Keep your knees bent, Kane roared over the wind. Roll when we hit! The ground rushed up to meet them not as a soft landing, but as a brutal collision with frozen earth. They tumbled through a ploughed furrow, the parachute dragging them several yards through the mud before Kane managed to cut the lines. Silence crashed down on them, heavier than the noise. Hunter lay on her back, staring up at the indifferent stars, her breath pluming in the icy air. Her entire body throbbed. She felt a hand grab her shoulder, rough, urgent. Hunter, report, broken bones. She sat up, wincing. I'm attached, I think. Kane slumped back against the frozen dirt, letting out a dark, ragged laugh. I hate flying. I really hate flying. They stripped off the parachute harnesses and buried them under a pile of dead brush. The cold was immediate and biting. Hunter's evening gown, hidden under the flight suit Kane had forced her into, offered 0 protection. We need shelter, Kane said, his voice shifting back to command mode. And we need a car, if air traffic control tracked the drop. The gendarmes are already on their way. They walked for 3 miles across the desolate farmland. The glamour of the New York skyline felt like a fever dream here. Here, they were just 2 survivors, trudging through the mud. They found an abandoned stone barn near a secondary road. Inside, it smelled of dry hay and old oil. Kane found a rusted Peugeot pickup truck under a tarp. He hot-wired it with the efficiency of a man who had stolen cars long before he bought them. As the engine sputtered to life, the heater blasted dust and lukewarm air into the cab. Hunter shivered violently, her adrenaline crashing. Kane reached over, pulling her toward him. It wasn't sexual. It was a transfer of heat. He rubbed her arms briskly. Stay with me, Hunter. Don't go into shock. I'm not in shock, she chattered. I'm just realizing that my life expectancy has dropped significantly since I met you. It's actually gone up, Kane corrected, his eyes hard on the road as he navigated them toward Paris. Before me, you were dying of boredom. Now you're just at risk of bullets. Comforting, she muttered. The drive was long and tense. As the adrenaline faded, The reality of their situation set in. Hunter thought about the files on the tablet she had secured in her waterproof pack. She thought about the image she had seen years ago. The ring on the hand of the man who ordered her father's death. "Kane," she said, breaking the silence. "The ring, the lion and the dagger. You said it belongs to the Moretti family." Kane's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Salvatore Moretti, my consigliere, my father's best friend. He bounced me on his knee when I was 5. He taught me how to tie a tie. He taught me how to shoot." "If he ordered the hit in Belgrade," Hunter said softly, "then he's been working with the corrupt factions of the government for years. He's not just a mobster, Kane. He's a broker. He sells chaos." "He sent me to the Corsicans to die," Kane said, his voice hollow. "He knew Jean-Paul would use poison. Sal probably supplied it." Kane pulled the truck to the side of the road, killing the engine. He stared out into the darkness. For the first time, the invincible Don looked shattered. "If I go back to New York," Kane whispered, "I go back to a civil war. Sal has the loyalty of the old guard. They won't believe me." "Then we don't go back to New York," Hunter said. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. "We finish it here. Tonight." Kane looked at her. "Sal is in Paris. He's attending the midnight gala at the Chateau de Lune. It's a black market auction. High security. Invitation only." "The Chateau de Lune," Hunter mused. "My father investigated that place. It's where the deals are made. If Sal is there, he's celebrating. He thinks you're dead." "We can't get in," Kane said. "We look like we crawled out of a grave. We have no weapons, no backup." Hunter smiled, a cold, dangerous expression that she had learned from watching him. "We don't need weapons, Kane. We have the tablet. We have the truth. And you have me." Underscore, 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 underscore. 3 hours later, the Chateau de Lune was glowing like a jewel in the French countryside. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Maybachs. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the valet. Kane Valenti stepped out. He had raided one of his emergency safe houses in the 4th arrondissement. The mud was gone, replaced by a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He looked lethal, composed, and terrifyingly alive. He walked around the car and opened the passenger door. Hunter stepped out. She was no longer the waitress. She was a vision of vengeance wrapped in midnight blue velvet. The dress was modest in the front, but plunged dangerously low in the back. Her hair was swept up in a severe, elegant chignon, revealing the diamond choker Kane had placed around her neck. She took his arm. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her face was a mask of bored aristocracy. "Ready to walk into the lion's den?" Kane murmured as they approached the massive oak doors. "I'm the lion tamer," she whispered back. The security was tight, but Kane's face was his passport. The guards hesitated, confused by the sight of a man who was rumored to be dead, but fear overrode their confusion. They stepped aside. The ballroom was a sea of corruption. Arms dealers drank champagne with politicians, human traffickers laughed with tech moguls, and there, holding court in a raised VIP booth overlooking the dance floor, was Salvatore Moretti. He looked older than his photos, his face flushed with wine and victory. He was laughing at a joke made by a Russian oligarch, his hand resting on the table. On his pinky finger, the gold ring glinted. A lion holding a dagger. Hunter felt a surge of nausea, followed by a cold, crystalline rage. That was the hand that signed her father's death warrant. "Stick to the plan," Kane breathed in her ear. "Don't let him see you bleed." They ascended the stairs to the VIP booth. The air grew thinner, sharper. Sal looked up as a shadow fell over his table. His laughter died in his throat. His glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound cut through the ambient noise of the party. "Dom!" Sal wheezed, his face draining of blood. "My God! The news said the plane. The rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated, Uncle Sal, Kane said, his voice smooth, carrying no trace of the betrayal burning a hole in his chest. I'm hard to kill, you should know that. Sal scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting around the room, looking for his bodyguards. I am so relieved. We were mourning you, Dom. We were just toasting to your memory. Toasting to my memory, Kane repeated, stepping closer. Or dividing my empire. Don't be ridiculous. Sal laughed nervously, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at the Russian oligarch and the French minister sitting at the table. Gentlemen, look! A miracle! The king returns! He turned his gaze to Hunter, his eyes narrowing. And who is this? The help? She's the reason I'm alive, Kane said. And she's the reason you're done. Hunter stepped forward. She didn't look at Kane. She locked eyes with the Russian oligarch, a man named Kozlov, who controlled the energy grid of Eastern Europe. She spoke in Russian, rapid, low, and menacing. Mr. Kozlov, Salvatore has been promising you the Valenti shipping routes in the Newark harbor, hasn't he? He told you that with Kane dead, the ports were yours. Kozlov frowned, looking at Sal. Is this true, Salvatore? Sal waved his hand. She's lying. She's a nobody waitress. Hunter didn't pause. She turned to the French minister and switched to flawless, high court French. Monsieur Minister, did Salvatore mention that he kept the recordings of your meetings, the ones regarding the Belgrade bombing? He has them stored on a secure server. He calls it his insurance policy against you. The minister stood up so fast his chair toppled over. What did you say? Lies! Sal screamed, panic cracking his voice. She is poisoning you against me. Guards, kill them. They are imposters. 4 of Sal's personal guards drew their weapons. The music in the ballroom stopped. The crowd gasped, backing away. Kane didn't flinch. He didn't even reach for a weapon. He simply pulled the waterproof tablet from his tuxedo jacket and tossed it onto the center of the table. It slid across the marble and stopped in front of the Russian oligarch. The files aren't on a server, Kane said, his voice projecting across the silent room. They're right there. Hunter decrypted them on the drive over. Every bribe, every hit order, every betrayal. He looked Sal in the eye. You broke the code, Sal. You sold out the family to politicians. You killed Arthur Bennett. And you tried to kill me. Sal looked at the tablet, then at the furious faces of his allies. The Russian oligarch picked up the tablet. He looked at the screen, then looked at Sal with eyes like a shark. You recorded me? Kozlov asked, his voice a quiet rumble of death. No, listen to me. Sal backed up, holding his hands up. It's a bluff. The tablet is probably blank. Open it, Hunter challenged. Sal lunged for the tablet, but the French minister's bodyguard intercepted him, shoving him back into his chair. It's over, Sal, Kane said softly. You can't do this to me, Dom, Sal pleaded, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. I raised you. I did it for the family. We needed to modernize. We needed to be in politics. You didn't do it for the family, Kane said. You did it for yourself. Kane turned to Hunter. Let's go. You're leaving? Sal shrieked. You can't leave me here with them. They'll kill me. Kane paused. He looked back at the man who had been a father to him. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, only a deep, exhausting pity. In our world, Sal, Kane said, death is the easy way out. I'm leaving you with the people you betrayed. That is a fate worse than a bullet. He offered his arm to Hunter. Shall we? Hunter looked at Sal one last time. She saw a small, terrified old man. She thought of her father, dying in a car bomb in Belgrade. She thought of the years of hiding. Goodbye, Salvatore, she said. They turned and walked away. They walked down the grand staircase, heads held high, moving with a synchronized grace that made the crowd part like the Red Sea. They walked out of the heavy oak doors, past the confused security, and into the cool, biting air of the French night. Behind them, inside the Chateau de Lune, the screaming started. Then the distinct, muffled pop of a silenced pistol. Then silence. Kane didn't look back. He walked until they reached the black Mercedes. He leaned against the hood, letting out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of 20 years. He looked up at the moon. "He's dead," Kane said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Hunter said. She stood next to him, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her trembling. Kane turned to her. He saw the tremor in her hands. He reached out and took them, pulling her close. His eye searched her face, mapping every inch of it. "You were incredible," he whispered. "You took down the old regime with 3 sentences." "I told you," Hunter said, her voice shaky but proud. "I know the language of diplomacy, and the language of war." "You're the most dangerous person I've ever met," Kane said. He brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "And I employ hitmen." "Does this mean I get a raise?" she asked, trying to joke, though her eyes were wet. "No," Kane said seriously. "It means you're fired." Hunter froze. "What?" Kane stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. He wrapped his arms around her waist, possessing her completely. "I can't have you on the payroll, Hunter. It's a conflict of interest." "Conflict of interest?" she repeated, breathless. "I don't want a translator," Kane said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't want an employee. I want a partner. I want a queen. I want you to wake up next to me every morning and tell me I'm an idiot in 5 different languages." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you, Hunter. I think I've loved you since you slammed that whiskey bottle on the table." Hunter looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the scars, the danger, and the overwhelming loyalty. "The hours are going to be terrible," she whispered, "and the retirement plan is non-existent." "But the benefits," Kane murmured, brushing his lips against hers, "are to die for." Hunter grabbed his lapels and pulled him down. "Deal." She kissed him. It wasn't the desperate kiss of survival, nor the terrified kiss of the plane. It was a seal, a contract written in breath and heartbeat. The waitress from Hell's Kitchen was gone. In her place stood the matriarch of the Valenti crime family. And as they stood there in the moonlight, Hunter knew that for the first time in her life, she didn't need to translate anything. The silence was perfect. And just like that, the waitress who was invisible became the most powerful woman in the syndicate. Hunter Bennett didn't just translate words. She translated power, loyalty, and love in a world that rarely understood any of them. Kane Valenti found his voice, but more importantly, he found the one person who could understand his silence. From a dive bar in New York to the gala halls of Paris, they proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's the truth, spoken in the right language. If you enjoyed this twisting saga of mafia romance, betrayal, and redemption, please hit that like button. It helps us create more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. What would you do if you found out your boss was a mafia don? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.